Welcome to Retire with Purpose, a show specifically designed to help you maximize your financial confidence in retirement. Casey Weade is the CEO and Chief Visionary of Howard Bailey Financial, a certified financial planner and Wall Street Journal best-selling author. He's your host on Retire with Purpose.
Hey, I'm Casey Weade, and we believe in retirement strategies that are driven by meaning and purpose. Join us this week and every week as we discuss planning for your best retirement, pinpointing your purpose, building a rock-solid financial plan, and unpacking trending topics that could impact your financial future. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weade, joining me as he does every week, my good friend and co-host, Marshal Johnson, here with me.
Hey.
And this is our opportunity to discuss retirement with you, whether you're at retirement, in retirement, near retirement, or you're just seeking that coveted job optional status. You have found yourself a home. We're going to be discussing a wide range of different topics today. We're going to be hitting on when to update your estate plan, healthcare before Medicare, increasing your returns on your emergency fund, and what about the goalpost? Where is your goalpost? And does it seem like that goalpost just keeps moving further along? How do we get that goalpost to stop moving? And then we have a very special guest. We have one of the leading retirement coaches and also a franchise expert coming on the show with us later. So if you're interested in not just retirement, but maybe even starting a franchise as your second act, then you're going to enjoy the conversation. We're going to have Bob Foley here in just a moment. But first, we're going to be discussing an article from our Weekend Reading for Retirees email series. That is one email that hits your inbox every single Friday, all designed to keep you on top of the latest trends. 4 articles on the latest trends in the world of taxes or healthcare, purpose, the latest retirement income strategies, all so that you can make those better decisions. And if you'd like to get signed up, go on over to retirewithpurpose.com. First name and email will get you signed up to receive those 4 articles and summaries and takeaways every single Friday, so you don't have to spend all that time on Google searching the never-ending world of the internet. Here today, we're going to be covering an article from Think Advisor with you. This one is titled 6 Ways to Help Clients Avoid Medicare's IRMA Surcharges in Retirement.
IRMA, that's one of those words that, unless your wife's name Irma, you just don't want to hear this. In retirement, Casey, it means that you're probably paying, if you cross these thresholds, you're paying more for Medicare.
Well, and even if you've never heard of IRMA, then you've probably heard of healthcare in retirement and the concerns and costs therein. Yeah, the thing that I find interesting in this article is sharing the bankruptcy rate for individuals 65 and older and how much it's increased over the last 30 years from 1991 through today. The bankruptcy rate for those 65 and older, it's increased by more than 200%.
Ouch.
And in a large part, that's due to out-of-control healthcare costs or not having the right healthcare coverage in retirement. A 65-year-old couple retiring in 2021 will need a staggering $300,000 to cover their healthcare and medical expenses throughout retirement. That's according to a recent Fidelity Investments study, their annual retiree healthcare cost estimate. They put it out every year. It's still hovering around $300,000. It's been right in that range for a number of years, and that may sound astounding, right? That may be very intimidating, but it could be significantly higher than that. A couple of things I want to point out about that study is that $300,000 is covering your basic cost of healthcare. It's covering your premiums for Medicare, your basic Medicare premiums, your Part B, your Part D. That is what that $300,000 is covering. It's not covering long-term care costs, which on average, a couple that's age 65, over 70% of those individuals will need some form of long-term care throughout their retirement life, and that's going to stack on top of that $300,000 need. And what if you make too much money in retirement? If you make too much in retirement, you may pay higher premiums. You probably don't have to worry about bankruptcy in retirement if you're worried about IRMA, income-related monthly adjustment amounts. However, it is still something that we find many individuals are coming and visiting with us because they're irritated about those Medicare surcharges. In this weekend reading this past Friday, when I put my takeaways from this article in there, I shared what we usually find. I think there's two areas of financial planning that are most often overlooked by financial advisors. That is planning for healthcare costs in retirement and planning for rising taxes in retirement. One of which, if not both, will be your largest expense in retirement, and both of which are one of the few areas in the world of finance where you can actually get some guaranteed returns for the planning that you're doing in the world of healthcare or in the world of tax planning. And today we're covering Medicare specifically.
Yeah, it's a great article that we're going to get into some tips here in a minute. But, this is an area that financial advisors really need to be aware of. As you touched on, IRMAA and the cost of IRMAA can drastically impact your financial security in retirement. Yeah. Now, IRMAA, Casey, what does IRMAA stand for?
Well, income-related monthly adjustment amounts. What that is it's a means testing program. It was established way back in 2003, but it's been kind of creeping in over the last 17, 18 years. And it was all designed to extend Medicare solvency, to make sure Medicare was around longer, right? And there's income brackets from which will determine what your premium is for your Medicare Part B. Also, now your Medicare Part D. That's one of the things that was rolled in over the last couple of years is now those surcharges are going to apply not just to your Part B premiums, but also your Part D premiums. And again, it's all dependent on how much income you have. And these numbers, maybe they seem a little high to you for a retiree, but I'm telling you, we meet with individuals day in and day out that fall into these categories. An individual reaches that point where they start getting penalized at around $85,000 in income.
That's a single filer.
And for a couple, that's $170,000.
Right.
And here's part of the reason that many individuals will be assessed these penalties, even if your retirement income isn't expected to be there for your entire life. One, it's based on your income 2 years prior. So back in 2019, those income levels are getting utilized to calculate those individuals that are qualifying for Medicare in 2021. So that's one of the things that you want to take into consideration. These penalties, they could take you up to a point where you're paying 3 times as much for basic Medicare than the individual that's next door, just because you have a higher income. And you can see how quickly that could add up over an entire retirement. We could easily tack another $100,000 on top of that $300,000 cost of healthcare in retirement. And so we want to exercise caution, not just in leading up to retirement and what that income has been the last couple of years, but also when we're in retirement, you might be overspending, right? You might be taking larger distributions in those first few years of retirement than you're going to take the rest of your life. But because that 2-year look back period, you could get hit with those surcharges on your Medicare, even if your income drops back down significantly mid-retirement. And I think the biggest reason that I see come up time and time again, bar none, is required minimum distributions.
Yes, absolutely. So that's what I was going to say. A lot of times individuals think, well, geez, $170,000 as a couple, we're fine. But what's happened is those folks defer their taxes. All of a sudden, those RMDs come around and they're 70, 80, 90,000 on top of Social Security pensions. All of a sudden, hey, we're up there in the IRMAA range before you know it.
And this article outlines 6 strategies for you to avoid IRMAA issues, for you to avoid those Medicare penalties, surcharges. And if you'd like to get a copy of this article, just email us at info@howardbailey.com or give us a call right now at 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559, or you can just check it out at retirewithpurpose.com. Get signed up for weekend reading so that you have all these strategies. And I think the first one relates perfectly back to required minimum distributions and the traditional advice. What's the traditional advice you've heard from your advisor? Hey, let's defer. Yeah, let's defer that IRA into the future. Why take distributions now? You'd have to pay taxes on those things. You're benefiting from deferring taking distributions from that IRA because you're getting compound growth on the dollars you would have paid in taxes each and every every year. So let's leave it there. Let's let it grow. And instead, we'll spend the after-tax money first. Even financial planning software still to this day, in large part, the majority of financial planning software is still automatically organizing your accounts so that you're spending the after-tax money first and deferring that IRA in the future. But what happens? If you defer that IRA into the future, it's going to get bigger. And if that gets bigger, what happens when you get to RMD age at age 72? Well, now you have to take bigger and bigger required minimum distributions, which could easily put you over that threshold. And now your premiums for Medicare could be 2 or 3 times as much.
Well, if you're listening to this today and you're in your 60s, 60, 62, 65, you've still got time to make adjustments. The challenge is when we sit down with individuals that are 72, 73, 74, they're already there. There's very little they can do about it. Get on track early to make sure this doesn't become a problem.
Yeah, the sooner the better. And rather than trying to defer your RMDs, maybe it's better to do Roth conversions, converting portions of that IRA to a Roth each and every year to control how big that RMD is going to be in the future. But if you don't want to do that, even if you don't want to do conversions, one of the things that we recommend, even if you don't want to bite that bullet, do the conversion, is to just smooth out those RMDs.
Yes.
Let's not let those RMDs double and triple over your lifetime. Instead, let's create a level RMD over your lifetime. And that's a strategy that we use day in and day out with the families that we work with.
I love number 4 here. Don't oversave in pre-tax accounts. I can't tell you how many times I've seen families here recently that have oversaved in their tax-deferred buckets. This creates problems on the back end.
Yeah, and as the article discusses, tax laws change, and they change quite regularly. Congress has historically done a major overhaul about every 10 years. So today's best tax strategy could be tomorrow's worst tax strategy, which is why we always emphasize that you have tax diversification. It's not that the Roth is the holy grail. It's not that the tax deferred bucket is you should never put money into it. We want to maintain tax diversification. I want you to have diversified dollars across your taxable buckets, your tax deferred buckets, your tax free buckets. And I would also throw in there business structure as well. If you own a business, you've got another outlet for tax diversification. And if you're interested in putting together a strategy to reduce how much you're actually going to pay in Medicare premiums in retirement, if you're interested in actually putting together a tax strategy to control that big old IRA and the issues it could create for you in retirement, give us a call right now for a special offer, a complimentary financial review for you for the next 10 callers. You'll meet with an independent financial advisor on our team, either in person or through a video meeting, and we'll help you determine how prepared you are to not just handle healthcare emergencies, the rising cost of taxes in the future, but stock market crashes, inflation, etc. In short, we're here to take the guesswork out of financial planning for you. It can take just 30 minutes. So for the next 10 callers that call 866-482-9559, that's 866-482-9559, we're offering a comprehensive financial review at no obligation. We'll be right back after this short break to take questions from you.
You're listening to Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson. This is Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson.
Welcome back to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. It's time to turn the mic back to you. Every single week, we receive questions from individuals who follow our Retire with Purpose TV show, radio show, podcast, and especially from the families that we meet with one-on-one in our offices. Today, we're going to be featuring a few of those top questions we received recently, and maybe this sparks a question in you, something that's been on your mind. Maybe you have something that's keeping you up late at night. Maybe it has to do with your debt. Maybe it has to do with your IRA, your RMDs, the tax year, your health care and retirement. Whatever it is, we're here to help you answer those questions. There's no cost, there's no obligations. Our brand DNA says we're here to help people, whether we can work with them or not. If you'd like to submit a question, get one answered, you can email it at info@howardbailey.com, or you can just visit retirewithpurpose.com. In the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, there's a place that you're able to type in a question, and we will get you an answer. And then we'll ask if you'd like to be featured here on the show. And if so, we will read your question, just like we're doing here for Christopher today. Christopher says, I'm 71 years old. As I grow older, how often do you advise I check in on or update my estate plan?
Christopher, what a wonderful question. You know, for our clients that we work with and families that we spend a lot of time with, we're doing that every year. But I think the simple response would be, as often as the tax laws change, the estate laws change, which could be pretty frequently as we get going here. But I think it's fine if you just double check your beneficiaries, speak with your financial planner. Maybe you've got a estate attorney. Maybe you've got a more complicated situation. I think every couple of years is probably sufficient. But if you keep on top of the trends and changes in the laws, I think we may see a lot of changes to tax laws on the estate side over the next 10, 15 years.
Well, and I'd agree. I think most, if we look back throughout history, there's on average been a major tax overhaul every decade or so. And so I'd say, every 5 years is a good time to just check back in with your estate planning attorney, your financial planner. And that might be the best place to stop, is visit with your financial planner and see what their recommendation is. Should I meet with my estate planning attorney? Maybe you would meet with those individuals separately. Maybe you'd meet with them at the same time. I think it's best that you meet with your estate planning attorney and your financial planner simultaneously, so we can make sure that everybody is on the right page. But I'd say, at a minimum 10 years, I'd prefer to do it every 5 years. If you have a more complex financial life or business life, maybe even once a year. I know for our high net worth clients, especially the business owners we work with, we're doing an annual roundtable with their CPA, their estate planning attorney, and a CFP from our team. And so that's something that we would do once a year. Other than that, maybe it's just major life-changing events. If you have some of these events that happen, then it's time to pick up the phone, call your estate planning attorney and say, hey, should I make any changes? That could be marriage. It could be divorce. It could be a new child. It could be a loss of a spouse or a family member. Maybe you've stepped into retirement or come into significant wealth. If there is a major life-changing event, then it's always time to sit down and get a checkup from a financial standpoint and also a legal standpoint.
Yeah, going through the year that we had last year with COVID, I think it illustrated to me that a lot of families don't have financial power of attorney. They also don't have medical, like a living will as well. And I think anybody that's retirement age or nearing that destination, I think it's important to get an updated, not just an updated will, but having those powers of attorney to be able to make decisions for especially spouses or mom and dad if they become incapacitated. I think that's quite often overlooked. Next up, we've got Mike. Mike says to Casey, in your opinion, what should an emergency fund consist of? CDs, savings accounts? What about retirement accounts?
Oh, Mike, I think those are all valid places to keep some of your emergency funds. I think the one that I would be a little cautious of would be the retirement accounts, depending on how they're invested. A savings and emergency typically happens when everyone else is facing emergencies. And so you don't want those assets tied up in some type of at-risk investment. So you don't want that emergency fund to be inside of a retirement account that's invested in the S&P 500 index or equities or stocks or even most bonds for that matter. You want to exercise caution. And you have to keep in mind when you take a distribution from those retirement accounts, not only could you be damaging your retirement, but you could simultaneously be setting yourself up for tax consequences that could impact your Social Security or your Medicare. And we just don't want to do that. I would rather the after-tax money that you have be your emergency fund, because you won't have those tax consequences taxes upon the distribution, and they should be someplace safe. I like cash. Maybe it's cash, maybe it's money at the bank, maybe it's a savings or CD account, maybe it's a portion home equity line of credit or a HELOC, maybe it's even in some cash value life insurance. These are all safe, liquid places. Now, when it comes to cash, how much do we keep in each one of these places? I think if we have cash, maybe we keep up to 30, maybe 60 days worth of expenses in a physical cash form. If it comes to bank savings, then maybe it's 3 to 6 months of your expenses. If it's beyond that, if we get beyond 6 months for our expenses in a liquid safe place, then I think we need to generate a rate of return on those funds. 6 months, let's say you're spending $100,000 a year, 6 months is $50,000 worth of expenses. But let's say you want to keep $200,000 safe and liquid. Well, maybe you're setting aside $100,000 of that in the bank, keep it in a savings or a money in market, maybe even some stacked CDs, keeping in mind the potential penalties if you need to liquidate them. And then you're taking that other excess $100,000 and setting it aside someplace where you can generate a higher yield. Maybe that's a more traditional investment that's conservative and low risk. That might be a fixed income portfolio of short duration bonds, securities, or alternatively, maybe it's even an old cash value life insurance policy that you have. I've met many individuals that have old life insurance policies that they can put more dollars in, and they're generating a 3, 4, 5% rate of return tax-free inside of their cash value life insurance. And I know for me, that's where my wife and I, we like to stuff our extra emergency fund cash reserves. We put that in an overfunded life insurance policy where we can generate a better rate of return than we could in a cash or a bank account, even a short-term bond. And we don't have to pay taxes on the gains each and every year. Not to mention, if one of us passes away, there's a tax-free death benefit that goes to our heirs. So you have a lot of options. Just weigh all those different options, and I think also utilize all those different options. Don't just use one. I think just like you're diversifying your tax buckets, your traditional investments, you also want to think about diversifying within these buckets, like that liquidity bucket, that emergency fund. Diversify that emergency fund if you have the financial means to do so.
Yeah, and I think it gives individuals peace of mind too to identify exactly what is in each bucket. We're going to say 3 to 6 months here, we got 6 to 12 months here, identifying that, and then once you've reached that limit, then moving it on to a different bucket. And that may allow you to still be able to sleep well at night knowing that your expenses are covered. But also I hear quite frequently, Casey, from families that are sitting down with us today saying, well, they're worried about inflation. Well, there's other things we can look at too. If you go out to treasurydirect.gov, you can look at I-bonds. I-bonds are inflation somewhat protected government bonds, and they're paying a decent rate of return today. I was just talking with a family that they try to pick one up every year. There's a limit on how many you can pick up, 10,000 a year per calendar year, but it's a good place.
Yeah. Our last question comes from Joanne. What is the best way to secure healthcare coverage before I qualify for Medicare in retirement?
Well, Joanne, today is your lucky day. It's easier to get health insurance.
You're going to pay for Joanne's health care? I felt like you're about to give away something. You get health care.
You get health care. Yeah. Hey, Joanne, you're caller number 6. No, I think this was a conversation for generations, and we're going to talk about this in a coming segment about how things have changed in the healthcare world over time. But today, it's easier than ever to get health insurance, to secure health coverage by waiving previous conditions that's opened up healthcare to just about everybody. But you got to know what you're looking for, what your health situation is, how often do you see a doctor, what sort of coverage do you really need. Then you can begin to look at the options.
Well, I thought maybe you were saying it was their lucky day, not just because you were going to cover the cost, but because of the American Rescue Plan.
There you go.
And what special opportunities that has presented for retirees in 2021. We're seeing people that are now stepping into retirement this year that didn't plan to until they turn 65 in a couple of years going, hey, I can get a great deal on healthcare right now that I couldn't get in previous years. The Affordable Care Act used to allow subsidies for individuals, still allows subsidies for individuals, but there was a cliff to that. So
yes,
you got to about $50,000 as an individual, $70,000 as a couple, and all of a sudden the subsidies are gone. However, because of the American Rescue Plan, that's changed. For instance, let's say that you had an adjusted gross income of $70,000. Under the American Rescue Plan, your premiums are limited to no more than 8.5% of that $70,000. So for you, that'd be about $6,000, right? $59.50 per year. That couple, looking at the second cheapest plan in their area, it would have cost about $24,000 a year.
Woo!
But because their payments are limited to $6,000 a year, they get a tax credit for $18,000 to help with their health insurance. I have been working with clients that were on Medicare programs, before healthcare sharing programs prior to turning 65, and now they're saying, hey, well, I can get better coverage at the same cost or a better cost if I take advantage of the new subsidy structure.
And have actual insurance.
So this very well might be your year. Now, better yet is free. So there's some employers out there will give you a bridge to retirement offer to carry your healthcare coverage until you get to be 65. Or, hey, maybe you're married, you got a husband that's still working, and you can go on a family plan. So there's a lot of different options. I encourage you to check them all out. We walk you through all of the options that are available to you in retirement on episode number 18 of the Retire with Purpose podcast. That's episode 18 of the Retire with Purpose podcast. We walk you through healthcare in retirement, demystify it and de-intimidate it on episode 18 of the podcast. And maybe you want to explore healthcare more in retirement. Maybe you'd like to take the opportunity to dive into what it means to have a comprehensive retirement plan. Well, we've got a special offer for you today. We're giving away 10 copies of Job Optional, my Wall Street Journal best-selling book on comprehensive retirement planning. Just give us a call right now. We'll send you a book for free, 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559. We'll be right back after the short break.
First-time callers are eligible to receive one in-stock book per request. Limit one book per week per household, up to 3 books per calendar year. See full terms at howardbailey.com/terms. You're listening to Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson. This is Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson.
Welcome back to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weade. Joining me, my good friend and co-host, Marshall Johnson, here with me.
Hey, hey.
And we have another very special guest. We're going to be joined by Bob Foley. And Bob, he joined us for a discussion on the Retire with Purpose podcast. You can check it out at retirewithpurpose.com. This is going to be released as episode number 237. And Bob, if you don't know, he's one of the leading retirement coaches in the country. He worked for years as a CEO in the hospitality, franchising, publishing, and financial services industry. And he believes that franchising, believe it or not, is the best avenue for the age 50 plus crowd in their second act. And then he retired from his corporate career, and he still is in that franchise industry himself as an owner of a franchise consulting agency, helping pre-retirees and retirees live out their passion specifically through entrepreneurship and even more specifically through franchise opportunities. We kicked off our discussion talking in broad form about the baby boomer generation and his viewpoint on baby boomers and their view of retirement, and also the timeline of what needs to happen in each decade of your life if you do want to have that traditional retirement.
They don't see themselves as being in their 60s or 70s. They just want to continue life as it's been. They really feel that, they can continue to do certain things for as long as they want to do it. Now, yes, certain people do decide to retire 100%. A good 25% of the people that I have coached choose that. And they get ready for it. They save for it. They figured it all out. They got the right real estate. They moved to the right places. Their spouse is doing okay. And maybe even if it's not their spouse, then it's their live-in or it's their partner or they're single. Remember, 50% of the population is single. So they've learned how to set up their life around being single. And as I mentioned, a good 25% of my practice just wants to retire, doesn't really want to work, wants to go out and enjoy life. They travel, et cetera, et cetera. But the other 75 want to work. Now, the majority of that group feels as though they have to work because they haven't been able to save the kind of money that they feel that they need in order to retire. And that's why they need a person to come in and help them, like yourself, Casey, so they understand exactly what the financial side of things are going to be. And they can't start that in their 50s or 60s. It's got to start in their 30s. They got to start in their 30s contributing to their 401k, company's 401k plan or an IRA. And then in their 40s, they really got to take a look at the college fund. They got to take a look at estate planning. They got to take a look at how they're going to finance their retirement, what kind of stocks and bonds or CDs to buy, or whatever the vehicles are. They need to do all that at least in their early 40s. And that becomes a very big part of this whole thing. So because by the time you get into your 60s and early 70s, I won't say it's too late to be able to finance your retirement, but it's going to be a lot tougher and you're going to have to work a lot longer.
Isn't that wild? And to think you have to start planning in your 30s. You know, how many things in life do you plan for 30 plus years? Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. And he brings up such a good point about getting started early. And he makes a good point that a majority of his clients don't feel that they can stop working.
Mm-hmm. And you can if you start early. So if you haven't started yet, give us a call right now. We'll get you started. 866-482-9559. Next up, Bob Foley. He recommends, and I picked this up in one of Bob's blogs. He talks about the value of introspection and reflection in retirement, and to consistently check back in with yourself to make sure you're filling your bucket in retirement. Let's hear it from him.
The big thing is self-introspection, and be honest with yourself. How do I feel? Have I put on weight? Am I watching too much TV? Do I have a regular, the whole thing about retirement is putting yourself on a regular schedule. And that regular schedule needs to include a good diet, exercise, cognitive exercise, and then a purpose, something that you're going to do either every single day or a couple times a week, whether that be volunteer work, whether that be owning your own business, no matter what the situation is, something that becomes yours and something that will lead you towards legacy. Because that's the whole thing about retirement, is leaving behind a legacy, because now you finally have time to do that, because the kind of work or the kind of time you spend is time you want to spend it on, not have to spend it on.
Well, that's kind of job optional, right? Having the opportunity to no longer do work for the money, but do it because you enjoy it. Do it because you are able to make a bigger impact in the world. And that could be a day a week, could be 2 days a week, could be volunteer work, whatever it is. It's an area where you find purpose, because I think at the core, you're helping people. When I see the happiest people, they're focusing on helping other people. And I wanted to ask Bob specifically, as he's helping individuals step into this second act, largely through entrepreneurship and franchise opportunities in this second act. I wanted to say, what is purposeful work life exactly? Is this something that we have our whole lives? Is it something we discover? How do we define it?
A purposeful work life is something that you feel in your heart is something that you want to do to help either change the world, change your community, or change yourself for the better. And then once you decide what that purpose is, it's putting the plan together to go out and attain it. And not only is it to go out and attain it, but to help it to flourish, whether you use your own funds to do that, or whether you go out and start a business to do that, or whether you volunteer with a certain not-for-profit to do that, or a number of people now, what they do is they put out their own shingle after they've gone back and become reskilled. Do you know that in most states, 60 plus people can take any college course at a state university, if not for free, at least for 50% off. So you can reskill yourself. You can get certification programs. You can get, you can matriculate towards a degree. You have to pay for certain courses if you're matriculating towards a degree. But all the courses that you may want to take just to see if this is for you, you can take either free or at much discounted prices, provided that the course isn't full.
Yeah, I've found many retirees that we work with going back to school, but you know what? I don't know that would be for the majority of retirees, that they want to actually go back and attend a university or get a certification. Maybe you're not much of a studier, but you would like to start a business. You would like to find something that could earn you some income in retirement, but something that you could really enjoy at the same time and wouldn't absorb all of your time simultaneously. And that's one of Bob's specialties. Bob believes that being a franchise owner in retirement is one of the best investments for your future. And I'm going to let him explain why.
The average franchise today costs somewhere around $150,000 to $200,000. All right. Now, keep in mind that the SBA has special programs for that on the lending side, and the requirements for, say, $150,000 is called an express loan, and that SBA express loan, they're looking for about 40% down on the $150,000, so $60,000, and they want you to have either 9 months worth of funds set aside that can pay your monthly expenses, your mortgage, your car payment, whatever, or that your spouse is still working and they can cover it all, or that you pick a franchise where you don't have to work it full time and you can cover your living expenses because you're still working full time. So there's all sorts of different avenues to get there, and so the big thing in franchising is you're buying a business model. That's what you're buying. And $150,000 to $200,000 sounds like a lot of money, and it is. But when you start to take a look at the fact that the business is going to last a good 10, 15, sometimes 20 years, it's an investment. It's an investment in your future, not a cost of your future. Because through that investment, you can hopefully, if you follow the steps correctly, that you'll have success with it. Now, not everybody has success. There are always things that don't work out exactly the right way. But the hope is that if you follow the system will guide you through that and get you to the other side. The neat thing is that franchises are overseen by the Federal Trade Commission, and they have to be 100% transparent about their brand and what's going on. And as part of the process, you get to talk to as many franchisees as you like, and they share with you all their financial information. They share with you exactly what happened to them and how it happened. What they do is they give you real life validation of what the franchise says is going to happen.
Well, I know it's hard to grasp over the radio, but I will say that what he has put together is pretty amazing. You go through Bob Foley's program. He helps you understand which type of industry in the franchise world would be best for you to enter and best adapt to your current living situation, financial situation. And then he helps walk you through the financials and interviewing and setting up those appointments with those different franchisees. But that's just one potential avenue. If you're just simply out there saying, hey, I want to get the engine started. I'm looking for financial freedom, but I don't really know where to start, I encourage you to start with my latest book, Job Optional. It's all about gaining the financial confidence to have the choice to never work again. We'll show you the formula to discover how to take the money you've earned and turn it into the legacy you can live right now. And I'm offering this free guide to listeners here today. So for the next 10 callers that call right now or text JOB, that's J-O-B job to 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559, we'll send you a complimentary copy of my book, Job Optional, at no obligation. Again, that's JOB job to 866-482-9559. We'll be right back after the short break.
First-time callers are eligible to receive one in-stock book per request. Limit one book per week per household, up to 3 books per calendar year. See full terms at howardbailey.com/terms. You're listening to Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson. This is Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson.
Welcome back to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weade. Joining me, my good friend and co-host, Marshall Johnson, here with me. And this is our opportunity to discuss another weekend reading article with you. So what is weekend reading? Well, it is a collection of 4 articles on trending topics in the retirement planning space with summaries and takeaways from myself delivered to your inbox every single Friday. You can sign up at retirewithpurpose.com. That's retirewithpurpose.com. And what we like to do is we'd like to take one of those 4 articles and discuss that right here with you on the radio. And if you love this discussion, you'd like to learn more, this is a very shareable article. If you'd like to share this article or hear a broader discussion, go to retirewithpurpose.com and check out one of our most recent podcasts on the Retire with Purpose podcast, where we discuss this article from Morgan Housel at the Collaborative Fund, where it is titled, Getting the Goalpost to Stop Moving.
I think this is a really good article, and right off the top, he says there aren't many iron laws of money, but here's one, and perhaps the most important: if expectations grow faster than income, you'll never be happy with your money.
Yeah, and he spends a lot of time reflecting on the 1950s and the 1960s, especially the 1950s. And, I think this article hit home to me because I am speaking with individuals on a regular basis that experienced the 50s and 60s. They remember those days. And I think we always hear, oh, it was so great back then. We're doomed now.
Sure.
It seems like it's very doom and gloom today.
Yeah, the good old days.
Yeah.
Right? The 50s where the middle class was just flying, the golden age of the middle class.
And everybody says, just how many problems we have today. Our kids are saddled with debt, or, we don't make enough money. We need to get a higher, wage. We can't live on the income. We can't live on what we're getting paid today. We need a higher minimum wage, et cetera. And I think the summary here does a really good job of summing it up. George Friedman, a geopolitical forecaster, I want to read his summary, and it's this. He says, in the 1950s and in the 1960s, the median income allowed you to live with a single earner, normally the husband with the wife, typically working as a homemaker, and roughly 3 children. It permitted the purchase of a modest home, a one late model car, maybe an older car. It allowed a driving vacation somewhere, and with care, some savings at the same time. Yeah. And he goes on to say, I know this because my family was lower middle class and this is how we lived. And I know many others in my generation who had the same background.
Yeah, and I think the 50s were that period of time because we had just come out of the Great Depression. The 20s and 30s, people were wondering how they were going to put bread on the table. And now we go through the 50s and everybody kind of looks back. But we have to look at this and go, well, number one, is this true, and is it contextually accurate?
Yeah, or is it that something else has changed in the last 70 years? And the thing is, I think what's really happened over the last 70 years is that America's wealth grew, but its expectations grew dramatically more. And just listen to some of these statistics. I think you'll be surprised. The median family income adjusted for inflation back in 1955, it was $29,000.
Yep.
In 1965, it was $42,000. In 2018, it was $63,000, and it was even higher in 2020. Despite what we endured in 2020, that number was even higher. We've seen income double since the 1950s on an inflation-adjusted basis. So the average income of $63,000 in 2018, that would have been equivalent to the $63,000 back in 1955, and everybody would have thought, oh my gosh, that guy's rich, right? You're making $5,000 a month when the average family is bringing in barely $2,500 a month. And yet we're still saying it's not enough. The median hourly wages adjusted for inflation are nearly 50% higher today than in 1955. And you might say, well, what about health insurance? The cost of health insurance has just exploded. But the reality is half of Americans didn't even have health insurance back in 1950. 2/3 didn't have surgical insurance to cover a major incident. Saving for retirement today is a burden, but in the 50s, the entire concept of retirement was just a luxury that was reserved for the upper class. 47% of men aged 65 and over were still in the workforce in 1950. That number's only 23% today. I mean, today, people turn 63 and they go, oh, I'm almost at retirement. I turned 65. I get to retire. The average Social Security check that everyone complains about today, the average Social Security check adjusted for inflation, back in 1950, it was half of what it is today. And poverty among age 65 was nearly 30% compared to less than 10% today. We've got it good today, folks. And that's one of the things I love about this article is that it's positive. It's sharing with you all the good news, all the things that we need to be grateful for and thankful for that we have today. Think about John D. Rockefeller. He didn't have any of the stuff that you have today. You go, John D. Rockefeller, boy, man, would have been amazing to be him. Well, he didn't have air conditioning. He didn't have heating. He couldn't watch the Knicks game on the weekend, right? He didn't get to watch the Masters from his living room. He didn't get to drive to work at 65 miles an hour every day. There's so many things that John D. Rockefeller would give up his billions of dollars in order to have that we have. Home ownership. The homeownership rate back in 1950 was 12% lower than it is today. The average home at that, it was a third smaller than it is today. You say, well, what about food? Well, food consumed 29% of the average household budget back in 1950. It's less than 13% today. And how safe were our workplaces? You went to work, were they safe? You got paid less, and death rates in the workplace were 3 times higher. What's going on? Why are people upset?
It all comes back to expectations, right? We went through this. We've lived through different times. We now have grown accustomed to this lifestyle. We've grown accustomed to these bountiful riches, like you said, that Rockefeller didn't have. And now we got to look at it and see how expectations can alter and interpret your current circumstances.
And back in the 1950s, those individuals, they remember the Great Depression, right? It was a tough life back in the 50s. It really was a tough life back in the 50s, especially relative to where we're at today. But they didn't know it because where they came from was so much tougher than where they ended up. And it was an improvement no matter what. Expectations can alter how you interpret your current circumstances. The reality is that you're gauging your well-being relative to those around you. You may not think you are, but what kind of car are you driving right now? What kind of shoes are you wearing? What kind of pants are you wearing? You have a cell phone in your pocket, right? I mean, we're doing these things because we go, that guy's got a cell phone. Boy, I like that car. I need this. I need that, because it's all relative to what we have around us. Back in the 1950s, what was different that made it feel so great? Back then, the gap between who you were and the people around you wasn't all that large. We had a lot of the same stuff, right? We didn't have all the variety that we have today. It was easy to keep your expectations in check because few people really lived better than you did back then.
Yeah, they make a note here that said basically a rich man smokes the same sort of cigarettes as the poor man, shaves with the same sort of razor, uses the same sort of telephone, vacuum cleaner, radio, TV set, has the same sort of lighting and heating elements in their house, and so on. The difference between automobiles from a poor man to a rich man were minor. Essentially, they have similar engines, similar fittings. In the early years of the century, there was a hierarchy of automobiles.
Yeah, and we didn't have the internet. We didn't have social media back then.
Yeah,
I think
right. You didn't
today's
get to share
economy,
your riches.
today's economy is really good at two things. One, today's economy really good at creating wealth, a heck of a lot better than it was back in 1950. But more concerning, I think, is the ability to show off that wealth today. And that creates this me too, or I want that too attitude that can easily lead to some pretty dramatic lifestyle creep. And if you really want to keep that in check, I think it takes two things. One is a constant reminder that wealth is this two-part equation. One, how much do you have? And two, what do you think you'll need? How much do you expect to have in this world? Because I've seen very wealthy people that don't have the biggest bank accounts. I've seen very poor people that have the largest bank accounts. How do you define that wealth? And I think wealth should be the definition of I have more than I need. If I have more than I need, more income than I need, more assets than I need, more than I expect to need in the future, then I am wealthy. That's the first thing that you need to keep in check. The second is realizing that managing expectations doesn't have to mean being conservative or unambitious.
Yeah, exactly. It's just realizing that insatiable appetite for more will always push you to the point of disappointment and regret. We see this in the stock market. We see it with spending. We see it with debt levels.
Yeah, I mean, think about some of the greatest investors in the world. Livermore would be one of those greatest investors in the world. Jesse Livermore, one of the richest people in the world in 1929, bankrupt by 1934. By his own admission, the problem was rooted in past success, increasing his appetite for future success. He'd say, well, if I can double my money in a year, why not triple it? If I can triple it, why not quadruple it? And so on and so forth until he went broke. And this is an extreme example, but one that many need to hear to this day, because what's happened in the stock market over the last year was a miracle. Being able to take such a deep dive and such a quick recovery over that period of time and have substantial gains simultaneously, you've won the game. If you've won the game and I don't need any more, I've done really well, I don't need to have more wealth, then maybe it's time to take some chips off the table. Maybe it's time for you to create a foundation of a financial plan so that you don't have to continue to be on the net worth treadmill. We're here to help get you job optional so that you can have a secure and independent retirement and stop worrying about what's next. What's next in the stock market? What's next with taxes? What's next with inflation? What's next with healthcare? It's time that you put a plan together so that you can let go of those concerns about the future. And right now we're offering a complimentary financial review for the next 10 callers. Give us a call at 866-482-9559. 866-482-9559 for a comprehensive financial review at no obligation. We'll be right back here with you next week on Retire with Purpose.
You've been listening to Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson. Investment advisory services offered through Howard Bailey Securities, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Working with Howard Bailey Securities, LLC cannot guarantee investment success or that specific financial goals will be achieved. Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards, Inc. owns the certification mark CFP and Certified Financial Planner in the U.S., which it awards to individuals who successfully complete CFP Board's initial and ongoing certification requirements. Howard Bailey Financial is a registered trademark of Howard Bailey Financial. All rights reserved. Information is not intended to provide specific legal or tax advice. Howard Bailey Financial nor its advisors are qualified to give tax or legal advice. You are encouraged to consult with your tax or legal professional for guidance on your individual situation. This radio show is a paid placement.